Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is brought to you by the Digital Disruptors and SB Digital, both of which are pushing the boundaries in this digital accounting space. I'm your host, Ryan Piercy, and this episode is on OCR technology, what is good, what you should be considering, and the products that are out there. And I'm lucky enough to be joined by the infamous John Toon from the Digital Disruptors, who's going to help us pick this area apart. So let's crack on. John, what is OCR technology, mate?
Thanks for that intro, Ryan. I'm not sure how I feel about being infamous, but it's all good. So OCR technology, I guess, is for lots of accountants and bookkeepers probably the second product on the list that they will be looking at after they've got in a cloud accounting product, whether that's Xero, QuickBooks, Sage, etc. And really the focus for most people is on how to make the processing of purchase invoices predominantly, although some products do sales invoices and a little bit of bank statement extraction as well. But it's usually a focus on how do we make that purchase process as streamlined as possible. And what the OCR technology does, which stands for optical character recognition, is you will provide it with copies of your purchase invoices, typically either uploaded direct through an app on your phone or by email, and occasionally by direct integration with a supplier's website or an invoicing portal. And it will review that invoice. It will extract the key bits of information, so the date of the invoice, the reference numbers, the amounts, obviously the VAT, etc. Sometimes the line items as well, and then have that prepared, ready for you to send into your accounting system. And again, lots of products do that in slightly different ways, and different ways of integrating and maybe building approvals as well as an additional feature set.
Yeah, and OCR tech, I guess, isn't confined to purchases. It could be anywhere, really, anything where you've got to extract data. But I guess in the accounting space, that's what we're used to it being. And our focus today is, I guess, on purchase invoices. It's not on staff expenses. That can be dealt with separately, and card processes. This area is so vast, there's no way we'd cover all that in the 15, 20 minutes we've got. So yeah, let's focus on the purchase invoice. And I think the key thing is to touch on first is what should we be considering? What does good look like? What makes OCR technology better in some solutions than others? And I think, the first one you've got to touch on is reliability. How good is it at always extracting the same stuff in the same way? And different products do that in different ways. But what are the other, I guess, big differentiators for you, John, like for good OCR tech?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the key ones, particularly if you're working in an accountancy or bookkeeping practice, is there an easy way of kind of seeing the overall picture for all of your clients? Some of the products that we'll probably talk about, like Dexter and Auto Entry in particular, really have a focus in on that in terms of they've got a client dashboard for an accountancy practice or a bookkeeper to log into, and you can see effectively the progress of where things are at. When was the last invoice uploaded, and what's sitting in the inbox to be dealt with and processed, and are there any outstanding bits of information or queries that need to be resolved? So for me, I think that's one of the other key features. Other products in the market haven't got quite the same focus, so it's a little bit more challenging maybe to see where things are at. But obviously, again, that depends on your use case, because if you're maybe advising a business, then they're not necessarily going to need to have that dashboard view. Potentially, they'll be much more interested in the quality of extraction, the accuracy, maybe things like line item as well, if they want features that allow them to extract line items and put it into an account system, and possibly, again, like we talked about in the intro, is like things like approvals maybe.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Dashboards might be more for the accounting side, but user interface is critical in the space, because generally businesses or accounting firms can have a wider range of individuals that are going to be interacting with this, and it can be across various skill sets. So if we look at a business, say, a trade-related business, they might have people that have to capture purchase invoices that aren't really that tech savvy. Having something that's really easy to use, where they literally just have to click one button once they've opened an app on their phone, makes it incredibly easy for them. They engage quickly and they use the product really effectively because of that. So user interface, I have found over time, is critical in any kind of purchase management data extraction tool. And then building on that, the integration into the system. They don't sit on their own. They have to integrate into finance tools. And so the integration into the systems that you will work with and the reliability of those connections is imperative. And also what data it can push in. So depending on the quality of that integration, sometimes it can suck data out and kind of pre-populate and prompt you as you're doing some data extraction. But most of the time, it's going to be a one-directional pushing data in one, into the finance system.
And I think actually you're right, that integration is critical, because equally, you talked about the user interface and making things as simple as possible, but also how do you deal with, just correcting mistakes, because they do happen irrespective of how good the technology is. As a human being, like reviewing some stuff, you might, occasionally maybe switch on an automation that shouldn't be on, or actually you might just find that the extraction doesn't quite get it right for whatever reason, but it gets into your account system and then you see it and you need to be able to fix that. And there, again, depending on the quality of the integration and how in depth that is, depends on how you would go around, go about fixing that problem, but also maybe teaching whatever product you pick to use how to avoid making that mistake again. And I think that's quite important.
Definitely. And then you've got the other consideration regarding integrations that we talk mostly about finance, but as we've discussed many times, frustrations from us, John, is that most of these OCR tools don't then connect into operational systems. So if you are working, in an inventory system or project management system, and you need your costs to go in there, so you can kind of see the profitability, they just don't connect in. So you're having to bring manual work involved. So selecting the right system in the space, depending on what your overwrap stack is critical as well.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing that I think we should probably touch on is the different functionality inside these tools. So you've already talked on line item extraction. You've got some that can do statement reconciliation. You've got goods receipt notes that potentially can be extracted and reconciled, purchase orders all the way through to purchase invoices, approvals. There's loads of different bits of functionality that are important. I guess that depends on the size of the business. So when you're looking at these tools, John, and you're kind of trying to marry them up against businesses, what is the process you go through as understanding the needs and finding and fitting the right tool to those needs?
It's very much process driven. I mean, and it'll be driven by the type of business and the complexity. So I mean, I know that's maybe sort of stating the obvious, but it is really about, does the business have a purchase order process, for example, and do we need to consider that and integrate it? Are they buying, goods that where maybe there's pricing that we need to have checked at some point in the process, because some of the apps have that kind of feature. You mentioned goods received notes. If they're buying goods and they do come in, and we need to do goods received note checks and verify those. Again, that's a feature that appears in some of the more advanced products, I would say, but not the more basic ones. And then, other things around, who is likely to interact with it. I mean, I think you made a really good point on things to consider, which is, is this going to be run by a finance team, or maybe is it going to be run by, people in operational roles as well? Is it going to be run by maybe, staff in departments where they've got to upload information because they just receive things for what they're responsible for? So there's lots of considerations, and so our process generally is to kind of map out what the existing purchase process typically looks like, and then we can also feed into maybe expenses or how they're dealing with bank information if that's relevant. We want to understand what the approval processes look like and what they want as well from a product. What do they expect? Are they wanting something that kind of handles everything for them and is quite hands off? Maybe also leaching into payments, because some of the more recent apps have payment integrations. Or are they wanting something where effectively they've just got a lot of volume, they want to get it into a system, but they still want to maybe have some manual control over pushing those invoices into the account system for whatever reason. And so there's quite a lot to consider. And once you kind of map that out, you can then get a bit of a feel for the types of products that would be appropriate to their needs.
Definitely, and more critical than ever when talking to businesses, what's the price? Like what can they afford? And where's the return, right? So it could be that actually they can afford a higher value product, but are they getting their return on investment? And trying to really understand, I guess, how much of this product are they going to use, and getting that balance right is critical as well. And
I think, I'm sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to talk over you, but I think on that pricing point as well, that's quite critical, because some of the products are priced on a sort of a volume transaction basis, and others are just a fixed price, and it's all you can eat kind of thing. So that does make a big difference as well to your usability, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to learn a bit more about the process that John and I and others in this space go through to understand how to identify the right products, please do check out the other videos in our YouTube series where we're kind of running through digital transformation, the process, and what you need to consider. But we talked a lot about what you need to think about in this space, the different bits of functionality. So let's talk about some of the tools, right? And let's start where I guess it all began, right when the kind of app stores, app marketplaces were being created. You've got, Dext, you've got Auto Entry, which came into the market not that long after, and Data Molino pretty much around the same time. John, how would you compare and contrast those three tools? Because they're probably the longest, the ones that have been around the longest in the marketplace.
Yeah, they definitely have been around for quite a long time, and I would say certainly Dext and Auto Entry in the UK at least are probably the two most well known, probably the two that are most used by lots of accounting bookkeeping firms. I think in terms of how you would slice and dice Data Molino, Dext, and Auto Entry, basic functionality wise, they all do the same thing. I think that's one thing to really understand. There are differences in the way that you would use those products, particularly the user interface and experience. And I think it's worth touching on the history of those products. So Dext, which used to be a receipt bank, really started out as an invoice extraction tool, back in the day, and then has more recently moved into things like bank statement extraction, moved into sales invoice extraction as well. Has provided things like that dashboard to be able to help practices manage the day-to-day bookkeeping requirements. Auto Entry started out as a bank statement extraction tool, and I'd say that they still lead in that respect in terms of the quality and the usability of that product, and then moved into invoice extraction, receipt extraction, and added additional features. And one of the things that they probably do better than others is line item extraction, and they do have supplier statement reconciliation as a feature that certainly Dex doesn't have. And then Data Molino, I think, is probably the lesser well known, and has really sort of just focused in on just receipts. They don't really do much else, or invoices. They don't really do much else. And I know people that do use that product say that their user interface and the way that you interact with the documents is really slick. I think for others, their experience is less good. But those are the key things. And then off the back of that, you mentioned integrations. Quite a lot of these are built in. Expense functionality, sometimes payments functionality, and also approval functionality with products like Approval Max, for example.
Yeah, definitely, and that's one of the key things to highlight is that they don't really focus on approvals, do they? They're the simpler, more bottom end, cost effective solutions. And yeah, if I was going to kind of simplify, I guess what you said, how I kind of pigeonhole these three is Data Molino was really good for accountancy firms as something that if you're using regularly is really slick and really effective. Auto Entry was really good at line item extraction, probably the best out of the three at doing that. But the user interface probably a bit more clunky, and the integration into Xero for a while just became completely unreliable, and that reliability factor was it's critical. You can lose faith in a tool that you're relying on automation. If you lose faith, then it's hard to recover from that. And then Dext, brilliant user interface. Some of the functionality probably not as good as the others, but because it's so good at getting people to engage on it, actually it probably wins out, and hence why it's become the market leader. But we've got some others in the market as well, haven't we? We've got HubDoc, which got acquired by Xero. It's now free if you're on Xero. Very kind of simple, hasn't really been developed much over the last probably 5-6 years. Probably the entry level point, I'd say. If you're going to start on data capture, that's where you'd start if you're on the Xero side. And then you've got like Ezi Builds as well, which is very bespoke. You can customize it heavily, and you can integrate it into the likes of inventory systems, into project management systems, which means you've got a lot more flexibility in how you can process transactions through. And then you come into kind of the mid-tier tech. So the ones that are a bit more expensive, a bit more advanced. And John, give us a taste of some of the products in this space.
Yeah, so I think probably there's 2 or 3 products in this space that really stand out for me. And again, I'm probably familiar with people listening or watching, those would be Lightyear, or Zahara, or probably Quadient as well, because they've started to make a bit of a push in the UK market, having come over from the US. And so I mean, I guess for me, where these kind of products differentiate themselves from the other ones that we've just been talking about is I guess just the amount of features that they have, the complexity that they bring in terms of capability. And also quite often as well, they're not just targeting sort of the traditional cloud products like Xero, QuickBooks, Sage, Free Agent, etc., but they're also looking to integrate into ERP systems. So, quite a lot of these products will have integrations into things like NetSuite, SAP, some of the other smaller end ERP solutions like iPlicit, etc. So that means that their scalability is much greater. And that comes with the complexity of the products, and they're priced at a level that sort of represents that complexity, because you're not talking about a sort of a 10, 15, 20 pound a month subscription. You're more likely to be at an entry level at around about £100, for example. And for me, what these products offer is they tend to be much more focused around more complex purchase processes. So purchase ordering, maybe things like price checking, which you definitely won't see in the more basic products. They will almost certainly have line item extraction, and it's quite high quality line item extraction. Their accuracy tends to be very, very good. So you're talking sort of like 99.9% generally. And they will do things like supplier statement reconciliation, and typically also have approval processes that are built in that you can construct, so that you can accommodate sort of that more complex organization that's more likely to be using this. So from an operational point of view, feeding into finance with layers of approval levels, however you construct those. I would say what these more complex products don't feature, which maybe sort of more traditional sort of bookkeeping requirements, is they don't tend to do things like bank statement extraction, and some of them don't tend to do sales invoice extraction, because again, I guess if you're looking at the type of businesses that would be more likely to use these, those are probably feature sets that are less required, I guess, because they should be set up in a way that has more automation and more process around what they're doing.
Definitely, and the other areas, they work really effectively with groups, right? So if you're on those lower end systems such as Dex Auto Entry, trying to move a transaction that's been put in the wrong entity to another one is an absolute ball ache, right? You have to kind of download it, then re-upload it, delete it out of the old one. It's just a pain. Whereas in the more advanced systems, the Light here, etc., you can just reallocate it to a different organization, and it'll feed into the one that it's connected to. So that's a big plus. And you've got some others in this market that I don't know enough about, such as Planergy and Tipalti, and even got ReceiptBot that I know we've talked about in the pod recently, that's kind of come into it as well. Even though it's, I would say, saturated, this market, there's a lot of tools in it. You still get these new starters coming in and finding a little niche that they can make a difference in. And I think on that, we've then got the other side, right? We've got the ones that kind of started from another area, such as expense management or payments, and have then moved into OCR technology, such as Nook, such as Pleo, such as like Apron. How would you kind of define those? Are they still kind of simplistic from an OCR tech perspective?
Gosh, that's a good question, Ryan. I think typically, again, I mean, I always go back to the history of how these products sort of came about and what they're trying to achieve. Certainly, like Nook and Apron, for example, they are products that were sort of born out of the open banking era, where in theory that whole new set of regulations and new technology was supposed to make payments more easy, particularly for businesses. And off the back of that, what they were saying is like, look, if we're going to do payments, that's part of a purchase process. So we should do the front end of that purchase process, which is obviously getting the receipt of the invoice information into our products. I mean, I guess probably what makes them stand out is they tend to be using newer technologies for that OCR, whereas Dex Auto Entry and the others have sort of got their own bespoke systems that have obviously been built up over the last 10, 15 plus years. These other products tend to be leveraging things like Google AI and stuff to extract information. And so the way that those operate, their interfaces tend to be slightly different. I think the challenge for them is that they work for a certain type of business. I don't think they necessarily work particularly well for an accountancy or bookkeeping practice that's trying to do stuff at a lot of scale. particularly because they don't necessarily have the dashboards and things. But they are really great for smaller businesses, I would suggest. Again, they don't necessarily have integrations into ERP systems, and if you want that end-to-end process there, that's really good for a business to be able to see and manage that, and even bring some more automation into that payment process at the tail end. What a lot of these products tend to miss out on, though, is probably some of those other features. So again, bank statement extraction, not really a thing. Sales invoice extraction, not really a thing. Complex approval processes definitely don't tend to feature in these kind of products. So I guess you just have to be understanding of what they're really capable of, and then really figure out what they do. The one thing I would say about a lot of these newer products, though, is they do have features that I really like. Things like, for example, being able to verify your supplier, being able to verify things like bank details, and actually being able to verify them on the fly in terms of if bank details change on an invoice, which previously was different on a previous invoice, they'll flag things like that. And increasingly, some of them are also doing VAT number verification and checks, which again is not necessarily present in a lot of the other products. Given that we see a lot of fraud, in purchase processes, that there's a high risk area, those for me are really like nice little standout features. Just to make it easier for a business or an accountant bookkeeper to have some real visibility about things that might change, which are quite easily missed as well, because they're not always extracted or not always easily sort of verifiable when you're looking at stuff of volume.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, by utilizing this tech, you are essentially reducing your risk of fraud, because you're digitizing processes, you're restricting the ability to manipulate things. And look, we can talk about this stuff forever, right? We love this space, and it's so vast. But I think we need to kind of bring this towards a close by. Let's do what we normally do in this time, which is our bed by bin, all right? And I normally throw it out to you, John, but I'm going to go first this time, and I'm going to basically say that my bed product, what we're in bed with effectively is Dext. We've used them for years. They are the cornerstone of how we operate our outsourcing department. We just love the interface and how easy it is to get clients involved and engaged. That's why we have loved working with them. To buy, I'd probably go with Nook. I really like what Nook are doing. I really like kind of the development pathway and what they've got as a long-term vision with kind of connecting different entities together as that one purchase management space. And then what would I bin? I'd probably bin HubDoc. I just since they were acquired, nothing's really been developed on that side. And it is so bottom level that we tend to have some clients start off on that if they don't want to pay for anything, but otherwise we don't really push them towards it. What about yourself, John?
Yeah, I mean, for bed, for me, it's similar to you guys, Dext. I mean, we have been a partner with them for a long old time. It's been transformational for our business. We did have a partnership with AutoEntry, because at one point you couldn't do the bank statement extraction, and we were doing that, in AutoEntry and not in Dext. But essentially, we've kind of just consolidated that down into one product, because it's easy to manage in one place. Whilst I've had concerns about the lack of innovation from Receipt Bank Dext in the last few years, they've suddenly sort of turned it up a gear and brought in some really fancy things over the last few months, which I definitely appreciate and I've enjoyed using. In terms of what I would buy, do you know what? I think probably something like Zahara, because I think they serve a level of client that we're more and more typically coming into, in terms of they have a requirement for digitizing process, and they've got some really neat features. They've got some features in terms of being able to plug back into things like Sage Desktop, for example, where we still got quite a few clients, but so it gives us almost again that kind of entry level to allow us to digitize a part of a process for a business that maybe isn't that au fait with technology. And then bin, I would definitely get rid of HubDoc, just like you, Ryan. I mean, that this was a product that showed great promise in the early days. They had the original sort of fetch features where they could connect into supplier portals and drag invoices in. That was a USP for a long old time. Xero bought them for strategic purposes to get into the North American market, which made a lot of sense. But over time, the technology has not been invested in. the accuracy isn't where it's at. It's not good enough for an accounting bookkeeping practice to manage and use at scale, and it's not good for multi-entity businesses either, because you've got to have like dummy email addresses or have multiple email addresses to access more than one account. It just doesn't work for me. So it's great. It's great as an entry level if you've got like a handful of invoices every month. But to be honest, it's not worth the hassle. And it's got to go.
No, well, I don't argue with you there, John. And I guess it's no surprise that for some reason you wanted a bed twice. But I think on that note, it feels like a great place to wrap up this week's show. Hopefully this episode has provided you with valuable insights you can take forward. Please do check out the show notes for links to the digital disruptors, SB Digital, and all of the products that we referenced in this show. If you want to ensure you catch future episodes, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you look out for the release every Thursday morning. And we look forward to speaking to you next week.